Hey everybody, welcome back. So if you've been watching my channel recently, you'll know that I've been building a lot of stuff out of steel. Front and back bumpers and rock sliders for my Jeep CJ7. And I'm going to be building a spare tire carrier for it here in the next week or two. And I built that carry rack for the Vevor diesel heater as well. One of my challenges to building things out of steel has always been, how do you get it cut to length? And how do you get it cut to the shapes you want without having to buy expensive gases or have really heavy equipment that can't be transported easily, you know, like oxygen acetylene bottles, things like that. Nothing that's overly dangerous to have around. And something that's a little bit better than an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel. So to me, the answer has always been the plasma cutter. And for me, the challenge with plasma cutters is finding one that will do everything. One that will run off 110 volts and cut thin materials out in the field on an extension cord, and one that can come back into the shop, be plugged into 220 and cut 3/8 plate if necessary. My first plasma cutter ran great off 110, but even plugged into 220, it struggled on 1/4-inch plate. My second plasma cutter was an absolute beast on 220. It cut 1/2-inch plate like butter, but plugged into 110, it popped a 110 volt 20 amp breaker. With the machine set as low as it would go, it'd pop a breaker in 5 seconds, so it was unusable to me on 110. And that was plugged directly into the wall and not even into an extension cord. So I guess the nice people at Vevor felt my pain and they sent me a plasma cutter to test. This is the Vevor Cut 50 plasma cutter. It is $178 with free shipping. I'll put a coupon code down there for you guys to get 10% off it if you're interested in buying it. So let's take a look at it. It's got that nice blue Vevor color. It's got a very heavy sheet metal outer cover with a handle at the top. It's got the power button on the front. Finally, thank you. Yes, I love power buttons on the front and not on the back. It's got the air gauge, the pressure gauge on the front as well. Thank you. I appreciate that. Another thing I appreciate is the power knob takes a little bit of force to turn, which means when I get frustrated and I throw my gloves and one accidentally hits it, I don't have to be worried about this being cranked to max or down to minimum the next time I pull the trigger. It's also got a nice bright display on the front as well. Turning it around, you'll see that I have already mounted the air regulator. The bracket for it comes included in the package. The studs and nuts are already in place. You do not have to take the cover off this machine to assemble it for first use. So you just mount the regulator. One nut holds the regulator onto the bracket. The nuts and the studs are already there. You get a little package with all the air fittings in it you need. This hose here, this black hose, I don't know if you can see it in the picture, but it leads up to the gauge. You put this little quick disconnect fitting on there and you plug it in. The fitting for the air hose that leads to the torch itself is already on it. So all you do is cut a short piece of the hose and they give you enough to make 3 or 4 mistakes and still have enough to get it right. Hose clamps they provide. You hook that all up, you're ready to go. You put your quick disconnect on, or if you want a whip, you can put a whip on it. So also comes with about, 3.5, 4 feet of 14 AWG power lead. Now, this power cord, this plug is 110 volt North American USA type power cord, and it does not, unfortunately, it does not come with a 220 volt adapter. So if you only want to run this off 110, you're ready to go. If you want to run it off 220, you're either going to have to buy an adapter if you don't have one, or you're going to have to cut the plug off and wire a 220 plug on it. I would recommend you get an adapter. That way you have the versatility of having it run on either one. Another thing to note, that this is not a pilot arc plasma cutter. There is no place down here to plug a pilot arc wire in. They call this a non-contact plasma cutter, but that just means that it's got enough power, and again, we're probably talking 220, that it's got enough power when you get within about 1/8 inch of your material, the arc will jump the gap and you can start cutting. But it is not pilot arc. Now, we know from a previous video of mine that it is not hard to convert these to pilot arc. I don't really know, after having done that, I don't really know that I think it's necessary. But it comes with 13 feet of torch lead. Has a nice heavy rubber cover over it. I like that. I don't like those nylon webbing ones. They annoy me. It comes with a P40, an upgraded P40 plasma torch. And the consumables, there's a set of consumables on it. I've had a a pet peeve about P40 torches in the past. I have never liked them, but they are the ones that are completely cylindrical, do not have any kind of real, texturing on it, and then have that zip-tied switch. They are never pointed in the direction I think they are. The switch is never where I think it should be. And if you've ever picked up a can of spray paint and pushed the nozzle and had it spray back in your face, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's really frustrating, and that's why I've hated P40 torches. This one has a little bit of contour to it. It's slightly curved. It's slightly flattened. It has some very aggressive texturing on it. I don't think it's going to turn very easily in a gloved hand. And the power switch is built into it, not just zip tied on it. So I think that problem of it constantly turning in my hand won't happen with this one. Also, check this out. It's got a little ball socket on the end there. You want to know something? I never asked for that. I never thought that was necessary, but you know what? I like it. I think that would raise the usability to some degree. I hope to find out. So that's the torch. Comes with about 6 feet of ground lead, kind of small. Clamp seems kind of decent. Again, it's kind of flimsy, but I expect it will do the job acceptably. Now, it comes with some accessories. It comes with, as I said, it's got a set of consumables on the torch itself, but you get 2 extra ceramic nozzles, you get 4 swirl rings, you get 2 extra tips, and you get 2 double-ended electrodes. And in this bag, you'll also find all the fittings and hose clamps and the other stuff you'll need to assemble it. It comes with this, and I don't even think we're going to discuss that. You're not going to be using that for plasma cutting. Maybe you'll find some use for it. I don't know. Comes with this. Again, I don't think you're going to be using that for plasma cutting either. Now, it comes with a manual, and I have in the past, deservedly so I think, bashed Vevor as well as some of the other manufacturers for having manuals that are pretty much worthless. This one is better. For starters, it actually covers the machine that you purchased. It covers 3 very similar machines. One of them is the one you purchased. The English is good. The pictures and the diagrams are large and clear, which I appreciate. And it's not one of those things that folds out like it's 27 feet long. That drives me nuts. It's got good assembly instructions. And of course, it's got the obligatory 5 or 6 or 7 pages on how not to put your eye out or cut your toes off with it or kill yourself. It's got the pictures of the 3 machines it covers, so you'll know which one it is. And it's got the specs of all 3 of them. It's got some nice little drawings and showing you what each knob, button, and control and plug-in does. It got a diagram, how to set the torch up, how to get ready for your first cut. It's got a picture of how to do your cutting, your consumables, and it's got a couple pages on troubleshooting. So you know what? While I think there is still room for improvement, this is a lot of improvement over what came with, a couple of previous ones. So kudos to Vevor, you're moving in the right direction. Keep moving in the right direction. Yay, I like that. So with all that being said, have I covered everything? Can we start cutting finally? I'm really interested to see if I think this will be my perfect budget plasma cutter, meaning it'll run on 110 for thin materials, and it'll be a beast on 220. So I'm excited. I really am. Can you tell? Let's get started. All right, I am set up and ready to start cutting, and I think I'm going to start with this on 220 volts because I think that's really what it was designed to run best off of and what it will run best off of. They all run best off 220. Everything works better off 220. So I am plugged in via an adapter into a 30 amp 230 volt outlet, and I'm going to be running 70 psi of air pressure. I'm using a 2.5 horsepower, 21 gallon Harbor Freight compressor. I think the CFM of this thing, if I remember right, is like 4.5 or 4.8, something in there. I've got some quarter wall big square tube. I've got some 3/8 flat bar, and over here I have some 1/2 inch flat bar, and we're going to be trying it on all of those. So let me get the camera mounted and we'll start cutting. Okay, let's start on the quarter wall tubing. I am going to set the amperage. Let's set it to 30. It shouldn't have any problems cutting 1/4 inch on 30 amps on a 230 amp, 230 volt outlet. The compressor may start. If it does, I apologize, but let's see what we can do. Okay, that may have been my fault. I went a bit too fast. I'm going to turn it up. You know what? I'm going to leave it set on 30 and try again. It should cut this on 30 amps on 220. Looks like it cut it all the way through, but it doesn't want to come out. Let's turn it up a bit. Let's turn it up to 40. Okay, we are set to 40 amps now. I may turn the air pressure up a bit too. Let's see how it does. Yeah, that was quite a bit better. And my technique is not perfect. I'm never going to pretend it is. So it cut through that at 40 amps with 70 psi air pressure fairly easily. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good test. I don't think you'll have any problems cutting 1/4 inch steel with it. Let's try the 3/8. And let's see how we do on this. I'm going to go ahead and crank it all the way up to max because I think it's going to need it for 3/8 plate. And why cripple it, you know? Okay, it cut right through that. I didn't really think it wouldn't on 50 amps. Let's take a look at the cut. That was a nice clean cut there. I mean, even especially for me, that was a nice clean cut. A little bit of slag on it, but you know, that's life. So let's do one more on the 3/8, and then let's move to the 1/2 inch. And again, sorry about the compressor. Okay, cut right through that. Let's take a look. Thanks to the compressor for not coming on immediately. That's a pretty good cut for me. I mean, I'm sure somebody who uses a plasma cutter for hours every day can do a lot better than that, but that's not bad for me. The slag broke right off. For me, that's really good. So this will cut 3/8 plate without a problem. Let's get the 1/2" plate up here. Okay, so here's my 1/2" flat bar. It's pretty long, so it's sticking out a bunch. Same exact setting, 50 amps, maxed out. Actually, it says 51 on the machine, 70 PSI air pressure, and the compressor just finished running. So let's see what happens. You know what? I better clamp it to the table because I'm going to lean on it and it's going to move on me. So bear with me for a second while I clamp it. Oh, and I better get the ground hooked back up too. It is. Okay, here we go. Take 2, 1/2" plate. Sorry about that. Compressor's right here in our teeth. So there's the cut on 1/2" plate. Damn. I don't know what I'm more impressed with, the machine or me. That might be one of the best plasma cuts on thick material I have ever made. Yay me, huh? So Vevor claims up to 12 millimeters. Let me switch that machine off. Haha, the buttons and the power buttons in the front. Thank you, thank you. So Vevor claims up to 12 millimeters, and I think 1/2" plate is 12.5. So with the machine maxed out, 70 PSI of air pressure, it had absolutely no problems at all cutting through that. So it runs great off 220. That doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Now the question is, will it run off 110? Okay, before we move on to 110, let's try it on some rusty metal and some painted metal. I've never quite really understood this test, but I know some of you have asked for it in my other plasma cutter videos. But if you're going to clean a spot for the ground clamp, why not clean a spot for the torch to start? You already got the wire brush out. I mean, what's the big deal? But anyway, we're going to test it. I think that's about the rustiest side of this piece. For the record, I rusted this myself using peroxide vinegar and salt. And then this is painted with 3 coats of the Rust-Oleum rust preventative enamel, which I just now did too. And of course I cleaned a spot for the ground clamp, but I'm too lazy to clean a spot for the torch. So we're going to see if the torch can start. Honestly, on 220, I don't really think this is going to be an issue. On 110 it might be, but let's give it a go. So let's get this hooked up. Where is my cleaned off spot? Right there. I think this is about the rustiest side of that. Let's just see if it'll start, and then we will do the same on here. Again, my apologies for the compressor if it starts. Gonna leave it set at maximum, 50 amps. Not a problem on the rust. Not a problem on the paint. And that was 3 heavy coats of paint. I wish I could have rusted that better, but I only started a couple days ago, but it's pretty rusty all around. So let's now go to 110. Okay, I am now connected to the 110 volt outlet. I've already got the rusted material and the painted material here. Oh, and one other thing. See this cord? Whoever designed that was smart. Thank you for angling it that way and not straight down. I have too many that are like that, and I can only plug one into it, but thank you. Another little, you know what? These little things don't seem like a big deal until you go to use them, and then all of a sudden you're going, what idiot thought of that? And then you're thankful when somebody smarter comes along. All right, 110 volts. Actually, 119 here, I think, was the last time I measured it, 20 amps. I'm going to leave it set at max because, you know, why not? Let's see if it'll cut on the rust and the paint. Starting with the paint. Cut through that without a problem. Let's try the rust. I can find the button. Cut all the way through that without popping the breaker. It cut all the way through that without popping the breaker, and that was with the machine set to its maximum setting. My other 50 amp plasma cutter wouldn't cut this much, a small little bit. It wouldn't cut more than about 3 or 4 seconds, even at its lowest setting, without popping the breaker. I am quite enthused now. I am quite enthused. Let's get some other material up here. Let's see how long and how thick it will cut on 110. Okay, so we're now plugged into my 20 amp, 110 volt, actually probably closer to 120 volt outlet. And this is 18 gauge or 1.2 millimeter steel. I don't know about you guys, but I don't think I'm going to have any problems cutting 18 gauge. But let's go ahead and try it. I'm going to turn the amperage down to 20. And we're going to see what happens. And again, I apologize if the compressor starts up. All right, we're set at 50. Let's turn it down to 20 and let's see if we can cut this. Okay, we are now 20 on the machine. Don't know if you can see it. I'm going to leave it set at 70 psi, although I think that's probably way more than it needs for this. But let's just see what happens. Just as I suspected, no problems whatsoever. There's not even hardly any slag on the back. Let's move on to something thicker. This is a piece of 3/16 flat bar, or what, 4.6, 4.7 millimeters. That piece of square tube that I had painted was 1/8 inch, so I know it'll cut through 1/8 inch. I'm going to leave it set at 20 amps and 70 psi. Let's see if it'll cut through this. I'm not really expecting a problem. I might have to turn it up a bit, but let's try it on 20 and see what happens. Yeah, it's going to have to be turned up. See how it's blowing back at me? That's going to ruin my consumable really, really quickly. So I'm going to turn it up to 30. I'd be thrilled to death if it cuts 3/16. I'll be dancing for joy if it cuts 1/4 on 110. Okay, here we go. We're now at 30 amps on the machine. Yep, still blowing back at me. Still blowing back, and I'm still in danger of destroying consumables. So I'm going to go up to 40 on it. We're now at 40. Let's start back over on the other side here. right, that wasn't a problem. Always helps if you can see into your cut. Of course, since I'm making a video, I'm kind of battling not to have the part covered, and sometimes I can't see in what I'm doing, but it cut that without a problem. Minimal slag on the back. That will probably just bust right off. Yeah, bust right off. So nice cut on 3/16. Let's try 1/4 inch. What do we got to lose? Hasn't popped a breaker yet either. Holy cow, I'm amazed. Here's that chunk of 1/4 wall square tube. Let's cut a chunk out of that. Get that previous chunk out of there. Let's cut a chunk out of this. I'm going to turn it all the way up to 50. Actually 51, because I think this is probably going to be the max it's going to do on 110. But we're going to give it a try. I'm going to hook the ground clamp directly to it because I want to give it the best shot we can. And let's go. Again, 70 PSI, maxed out, 51 amps on the dial. All right, it just popped my 20 amp breaker. Let me reset and come back. Okay, with the machine maxed out 51 amps on the readout, I got maybe, what did I get here? I got 21 and 8, so I got about almost 30 millimeters, or about an inch, a little more than an inch of cut before it popped my breaker. And it was cutting all the way through it. Don't know if you can see it, but it was cutting all the way through it. That is better than I expected. Let's turn the machine down to 40, which I already did. Air pressure is still at 70. Let's see how far, if it'll cut through the 1/4 inch set to 40, and how far it will go before it pops the breaker. All right, so here we go. All right, I gotta say, I'm pretty impressed with that. That is, let's set this to an inch. That is easily 2 to 2 1/4 inches of cutting on 1/4 inch material. Set to 40 amps. It cut all the way through it without a problem, and it did not pop the breaker. I am very, very, very enthused about this little machine. It really did everything I would expect it to do and more. I was really not expecting to get 1/4 inch material on 110 volts. My past experience with that has not been good. You know what? I like that so much. Let's do it again. Let me find a clean spot for this around here. I'm gonna stop the recording a bit and let the compressor kick on, and so it's not, you guys don't have to listen to it, and we're going to come back and we're going to make another cut like that just to verify. Okay, it just occurred to me that the compressor is plugged into the same outlet as the plasma cutter, and it's possible that the compressor kicked on, and the combined draw of both of them is what popped the breaker. So let's turn the plasma cutter back up to max. Let's turn the compressor off. In fact, let's unplug it to make sure it's off, which it is now unplugged. And let's try again. Let's see if it was the compressor causing the combination of the two of them. Here we go. Nope, popped it anyway. Let me reset, I'll be right back. Okay, we're all back on now, and yeah, that, for at least my experience, that about, what, 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches, that's all I'm gonna get on 110 volts with the machine maxed out before the 20 amp breaker pops. And if you're trying to do this and your breaker is popping almost anything on almost any setting at all, do yourself a favor, go down to an electrical supply shop, buy a quality breaker, stay away from the cheap junk at the Home Depot and other places like that. Not saying you can't get a good breaker there, but my experience with them has been poor. So let's turn it back on. Let's set it back to 40 amps again, and let's try, I don't know, I don't think I'd ever need more than about a 3-inch cut, and I'm thrilled to death it'll cut 1/4 inch on 110. Let's turn it back on. Let's set the amperage back down to 40 because I was not popping with it on 40. The air pressure is still at 70. I'm going to go ahead and leave the compressor unplugged, more so just I don't annoy you guys than anything else. And let's cut a ways into this and see how far we can get. Okay, finally popped the breaker again on 40 amps. Let me bring it back up and we'll come back and see how far we got. Okay, lights and power's back on. Let's see what we got here. We got a total of 3.5 inch cut through that 1/4 inch before it popped the breaker. And I think you can see here, I hope you can see here anyway, that cut is clean and all the way through. I don't really expect any more than that on 110, 120 volts. Do you guys? We all have to understand the limitations here in America of our crappy 110 volt system as opposed to those who are lucky enough to have 220 throughout their entire house. In some places, it's actually 240. So I'm actually pretty pleased with that. I don't expect that I would ever be cutting 1/4 inch on, more than say, 2-inch wide 1/4 inch flat bar on 110. And most of what I'm going to be doing on 110 is going to be sheet metal up to 1/8 inch, and probably not even that. 14 to 10 gauge will be the maximum I'm going to do. So I'm actually fairly happy with that. That's the best I have gotten so far out of any budget plasma cutter. So I'm going to clean everything up and I'm going to get in a better position, and we'll come back and I'll give you my final opinions on this plasma cutter. So I guess it's pretty obvious from the comments I made during testing what I think of this plasma cutter. Is it the perfect budget plasma cutter? Well, it might be for me. Whether it's for you or not, I don't know. It depends on how you're going to use it. It certainly is a very good all-around plasma cutter. On 110, it cut material up to 1/4 inch before it started popping my breaker, and I could get a 3-inch cut set on 40 amps on 1/4 inch steel before it did pop my 20 amp breaker. And that's more than I was going to ask from it on 110 volts. On 220, it cut thicker than what Vevor said it would do. Vevor claims 12 millimeters, it cut 1/2 inch, which I think is 12.5 millimeters, and it cut it cleanly and without a problem. So that's pretty good. I've got 2 other plasma cutters. This one is a better all-around plasma cutter than either of them because it will do 110 and 220 and do both fairly well. I've got friends with budget plasma cutters, and it's always the same story. They're either good on 110 and bad on 220, or they're good on 220 and bad on 110. It's just, you can't seem to win with them until you start getting up, $1,200, $1,400 and above. And you know what? I'm not even going to make that comparison because it's unfair. I'm never going to buy a $2,000, $1,200, $1,500 plasma cutter, and I think most people watching this video probably aren't going to either. This has some nice features and just some small little touches I like. I like the fact that the air gauge is on the front. I like the power button on the front. I like the fact that the dial doesn't turn stupidly easily. I like the improved P40 torch. I like just a little touch like this plug being turned sideways. I like that. That's nice. It says somebody was trying to think of things that would make it better. Little quality of life improvements can make a big difference on something like this. So I think it might be the perfect budget plasma cutter for me. I think you're going to see a lot of it from now on as I cut and make things out of steel because it's going to be my go-to plasma cutter for a while. Now, let's talk just for a second about Pilot Arc. No, this machine does not have Pilot Arc. It's not hard to add Pilot Arc to it, but let me tell you something about Pilot Arc. If you're trying to run this mainly on 110, I have never seen a plasma cutter, running on 110 with Pilot Arc where the Pilot Arc was worth a darn. They sputter, they stutter, they don't really work very well on 110. I'm sure there's probably some out there that do, but I've seen 5 or 6 and I've heard of other people and it's all over the internet. They don't work well on 110. On 220, they work great, but with 220, you don't really need them. I mean, that arc will jump through almost anything on 220. I've tried heavily rusted metal and painted metal, 3 coats of paint. It jumps right through it. It's not an issue. And besides that, if you have so much heavy scale that the arc won't jump through it, let's face it, you're going to be cleaning that scale off to get the ground clamp on. Go ahead and clean a spot for your torch to start on, and then you won't ever have any problem. But you can convert it if you want. I made a video on how to do it. It costs 20 bucks and you might have to buy a new torch, but it's not hard to do. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about Pilot Arc. It's not something I think I'm going to really worry that much about anymore. I like this P40 torch so much, and the consumables for P40 torches are so cheap. I think I'm just going to stick with it till it gives me a reason a reason to change it. Anyway, I think that covers it all. I like this. I recommend it. Thank you to Vevor for sending it out for me to test. I really appreciate that. And you'll be seeing more of it because it's going to be my go-to plasma cutter in the near future. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.